You ever wish you could time travel? You ever thought about it? Imagine if you could go back in time, change events, or imagine if you could go forward, see how something turned out, come back into the present, and make adjustments. Imagine if you could do that with a financial decision. Should you sell the house or keep it? Do you keep the job? Do you work an extra year? Imagine if you did that with Social Security. You could take two strategies, put them side by side, go into the future and say, which one got me the most amount of income? Which one maximized my benefits? Which one did I pay the least amount of taxes? And then you could come back into the present and choose what was going to be optimal for you. See, I believe that in proper planning, it helps you make decisions really clear. I actually remember this situation years back when my wife and I got married. We were living in this small little 600 square foot apartment above a garage. It was Christmas Eve, and there was no presents under the tree. It was about 10 o'clock, my wife had already gone to bed, and I'm staring there looking at this Christmas tree, and there's just no presents. We were living off food stamps at the time, there was an eviction notice out the door, and things were tight. We did have some income though, and I remember sitting there thinking, you know, if I would have just saved $1 every week for the last year, I would have had $52, I could have done something with that. But I didn't plan, I didn't prepare, I didn't look ahead, and now I'm finding myself in this situation of regret. So proper planning makes a huge difference. And when it comes to your retirements, Social Security is a big part of that. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. So we're going to break this up into three simple sections. We're going to be talking about what is Social Security, how complex is it, and will it be there for you? Show of hands, how many have heard that Social Security fund is running out? Right? We're going to talk about that impact and how to plan for it. In our second section, we're going to talk about pensions and Social Security, working, age combinations, and everybody's favorite, taxes. We can show you some real strategies on how to potentially reduce taxes on your benefits so you actually get to keep more of what's yours. Because frankly, it's not how much you make, it's how much you keep that matters. We'll take a short break, and in our final section, we're going to talk about some filing strategies, how to start planning, and there we go. How that gets started for you guys. So I'm Nick, I'm going to be your instructor today. I've been in financial service for over a decade. I'm not going to bore you with all that information of a long background. There's really only two things that are important for today. The first of which is I'm a certified financial fiduciary. As a fiduciary advisor, we're held to a higher standard, which basically involves putting the interest of our clients, in your case, our students, ahead of our own, as well as disclosing any conflicts of interest. The second thing is I carry my NSSA, which is a National Social Security Advisor. Does anybody know how many financial advisors there are in the state of Oregon? Any guesses? 3,600. 3,600 professionals that call themselves a financial advisor. Anybody know how many carry their NSSA? Well, myself included, there are 5 in the state of Oregon, which I've always found interesting because Social Security applies to pretty much everyone, but the majority of advisors are not focusing on that as far as how to help their clients plan. So that's what we're going to be going over today. A couple housekeeping items. We have refreshments in the back. Restrooms are just down around the corner. Please make sure to silence your cell phones. Just kind of think of this like a theater. You don't want to be the one person that everybody stares at. Questions general, this part's important. We're going to be flying through this material at about a 30,000 foot view. We simply don't have the time to go through everybody's individual questions because all your situations are unique. So if you have a general question, something about the material we're covering, just make sure to raise your hand. We want to make sure you're understanding that. But if it's a specific questions, you have a notes page in front of you. And go ahead and jot down your notes. You guys are going to each have an opportunity for what we call a strategy session. And what the strategy session is, it's a one-on-one with myself or one of our advisors to get your questions asked, if we need to run reports. We'll talk about that a little bit more later. All right. This next part, I promise, will be the most boring part of today's class. Our compliance and legal teams have asked that we keep this on the board for a couple minutes. All right. So we're going to go through this material. I get pretty excited. I've been told I go a little bit fast, so if I'm going too quick, just please raise your hand. And I'm not going to slow down, but it's going to be fun to see which of you are not keeping up with the rest of us. All right, so today's goal is pretty straightforward. We want to empower you with education. I've been doing this long enough. I've worked with thousands of families and individuals. And one of the common denominators I've found is that people who retire well are educated. Now, I don't mean educated like you have to have a financial degree or be an accountant or a CPA, but I mean you're taking the time to come and get education, which is what you've done here today. Now, you'll notice that I didn't buy you guys a fancy steak. I'm not up here in a three-piece suit. This is not going to be a sales presentation. There's going to be no bait and switch. We're not going to be talking about products. This is an educational event. So if you thought that's what this was, take a breath, smile. We might even have a little fun today. The goal is that we're going to be able to give you some information that you could use today if you wanted to. It might be how to utilize a spousal benefit to get an extra $300 a month on your Social Security. It might be using a strategy that's going to reduce where your Social Security is taxed. You get to keep more of what's yours. Maybe how to pair that with a pension and avoid some penalties. But the goal is you'll be able to take that, implement that into your strategy, and actually improve your situation. So if at the end of this, you guys are sitting here and say, you know what, that was worth it. I'm glad I came. We know that we did our job. One of the things that we found when it comes to Social Security and retirement is it's a treacherous journey. I think of if there's any Lord of the Rings fans, kind of the map of Mordor, and there's monsters, there's dragons, there's quicksand. You start off with this treasure, and there's all these things that are trying to steal that treasure. And so the good news is we get to be your guide today. We've made this journey hundreds, thousands of times. We know the paths to take, we know the ones to avoid, and even if we come across any monsters, like the queen monster of taxes, we've dealt with her a couple times. We know how to avoid her, run through her legs, so you actually get to keep your treasure, retain what's yours, and even pick up a little bit along the way. All right, so as we start off here, let's talk about what is Social Security. So Social Security, when it comes to the average person, it represents about 40% of their average earnings, with the other 60% coming from sources like your retirement plans, pensions, annuities, other defined income. Now, if you are on the higher earnings scale, that might be a lower percentage. Maybe it only represents 10, 15, or 20% of your retirement picture. Where if you're on the lower earnings scale, maybe it's a lot more. Maybe that Social Security for you is 70, 80, 90%. Regardless what that is, the goal is that we maximize that benefit. Because if you think about it, how did you get your Social Security in the first place? You worked, right? A lot of you work in those 30, 40, 50-hour weeks, and you did that for decades on end. And this was money that came out of your paychecks. You didn't get to invest it. You didn't get to save it, right? It was pulled from you. You didn't get to spend it, and now the time has come to collect. So let's make sure that you get as much of that benefit as you're entitled to. I actually remember this couple, Alan and Sally, they're sitting here in the front. When they came in for their strategy session at this big conference room table, and we came in, and one of the first questions we asked is, do you currently have a plan for your Social Security? Well, they looked at each other and they said, well, yeah, we've done a bunch of research. We've talked to friends, colleagues, and everyone seems to say, hey, when you get to full retirement age, that's when you turn on your benefit. Well, I said, all right, great. Have you guys run your numbers? They said, well, no. So we ran a report for them, updated their statements, and what we found is that Sally, by utilizing a spousal benefit, was going to be able to get an extra $300 per month, every month, for the rest of her life. So while everybody else might be telling you, hey, you just turn at full retirement age, what I'm saying is unless you've run your numbers, unless you've actually gone through and seen what your best options are, you don't know what's going to be best for you. Because when it comes to Social Security, the complexity, it's a beast. There's literally over 81 different age combinations, there's multiple claiming strategies, and hundreds of calculations that go into determining what your benefit is. And by making the right strategy, what I'm going to be able to show you is that can literally mean the difference of an additional $100,000 over your lifetime. It could be the difference of an extra $500. It could be reducing your taxes. Because again, it's not how much you make, it's how much you keep that matters. Anybody want to guess how many people actually get it right when it comes to Social Security? As far as the optimum claiming strategy, we found that it's 4% of people. 4% of people actually get it right, meaning 96% of us leave money on the table, meaning they didn't get the maximum benefit, they paid more in taxes than maybe they had to, they didn't avoid penalties, Now 4%, let's put this in perspective. Look around the room today. That's 1 in 25. 1 in 20, 25 people. That's not a lot. So our goal here today is through that education that we're going to make you into a 4%er and make sure you get to maximize those benefits. One of the primary questions we get from students and clients alike is, am I going to outlive my money? And what we find out is about half of us are concerned with that. And that becomes a concern because we want to make sure that everyone's able to at least maintain their standard of living. Right? Nobody wants to be used to this standard when they're working, get into retirement and have to lower that down. And ladies, I'm going to speak to every one of you in the room. 9 times out of 10, you'll be the surviving spouse. 90% of the time in this country, it's the wife who's going to be the one left as the surviving spouse, figuring out how to make the mortgage payments, figuring out what they're going to do with Social Security, having adjustments in their taxes. And fellas, I've been doing this long enough. I've never come across a man who didn't want to make sure that his better half was taken care of when he passed. So this is the importance of planning, why you guys are here today. Because we're going to show you how to build out a strategy to make sure that it doesn't only work while you are both here, but also when the first of you pass. Because there's a lot of changes. There's a reduction in benefits, there's a change in taxes. If you have pensions, there can be adjustments there. So we want to make sure that you have confidence in your strategy, knowing that you cross the T's, you dot the I's, you mathematically test your income sources, so that when you elect that strategy, you know this is going to work now, and it's also going to work into the future. All right, so let's jump into this. There's 3 pieces of the Social Security puzzle. The first is determining what your benefits are. You can do this in one of 2 ways. You can either go to ssa.gov, log in online, do it there, or some of you have been getting your statements. So that's part 1, is saying, all right, what are these benefits? The second is understanding what are your options. So let's say it's me, my wife's name is Riley, so I have my benefit, she has her benefit, and let's say we have an option for a spousal. So we got 3 options to choose from. And the last part is, how do we maximize those? The maximization comes in 2 forms. There's 2 things you need to look at. The first is the what. So are we using my benefit in a spousal? Is it hers in a spousal? Are we both claiming ours? And the second is the when. If you probably noticed from your statements, depending on when you poll is going to determine what your benefits are. And as you guys are going to see here, it also impacts if you're going to have penalties, if there are deductions, offsets, and the big one is going to be taxes. So it's the what and the when. Show of hands, how many of you are going to have a pension or will have a pension in retirement? A couple of you, usually about a third of the room here. This is going to apply directly to you. So there's 2 things you want to be aware of. The first is the WEP. So this applies if you have a pension and you did not pay into Social Security. Now this one's pretty straightforward, or this one's kind of tricky. If you received a pension where you did not pay into Social Security, so when you were receiving your paycheck, Social Security was not a line item, there could be a potential reduction of your benefits. So remember this lady who came in, she'd moved from Nevada. And when she came in for her strategy session, we found out she had a pension. She was getting ready to turn on her benefits, and what she didn't know is if she was going to proceed with that strategy, she was going to lose $500 per month. Now, fortunately, we caught it before, adjusted her income plan, so she was going to have the income that she needed. But for a lot of you, if this applies, if I was in your shoes, I'd sure as heck want to know what that's going to be. Am I going to have a reduction in my Social Security benefits? And if so, what is that amount going to be, and what are my options? Now, as I said, this one's straightforward. I didn't pay into Social Security, they reduced my benefits. This one is tricky, however. So, same situation as the first, but if you're working for a government, so we're talking a state, local, or federal government, you didn't pay into Social Security, they're not reducing your benefits, they're reducing your spouse's. And what do we know? 9 times out of 10, Riley's going to be the one that's left trying to figure things out. So picture it this way. I got my Social Security and I got a pension. Riley's got her Social Security. We're enjoying our retirement. I get hit by a beer truck and die. Now she has a reduction of not only the Social Security, but also there's a reduction on the pension side. Now, wouldn't it be great for her if she knew exactly what those numbers were going to be today? So she could have peace of mind and confidence knowing that, hey, when Nick passes someday, unless it's that 10% that he's the first to go, then I'm going to be okay. That's where proper planning comes into place. By running your numbers, you don't have to guess. This is that thing where we get to go into the future, and we can kill one of you off on paper and say, okay, what happens if one of us dies at 70, 75, 80, 90? What is that impact going to be? Is there a reduction here? Is there a change in the pension? Because for the third of you that raised your hands on those pensions, not all of you chose 100% survivorship. Maybe some of you chose 75 or 50. So imagine being able to go into the future and saying, hey, here's what it looks like if one of us passes. Here's the change in our income. Here's the change in our taxes. And you know what? If the picture looks good, you don't have to worry. But if it doesn't look good, we're not in the future, right? We're still back in today. We got 20, 30 years ahead of us, so we can make adjustments. Maybe that means we're going to choose a different strategy for our Social Security. Maybe it means that we need to apply some extra savings from retirement or adjust our distributions. But the point is it allows you to see what's coming down the line, make adjustments today, so you have peace of mind knowing that what you're choosing is going to be good both now and later down the line. All right, show of hands. How many of you are planning on working while taking your Social Security benefits, even part-time? A couple of you? All right, this is going to apply directly to you. So a lot of people don't know that if you turn on your Social Security benefits and you have earned income, there can be a potential penalty. So let's clarify what we're talking about earned income. We're talking about you're getting that from an employer, or maybe if you're self-employed. We're not talking about pensions. We're not talking about distributions from your retirement accounts. We're not talking about you pulling from your savings. So this is earned income coming into the household. From age 62 to full retirement, you can make up to $21,240. Here's the penalty. For every $2 you go over that limit, $1 is withheld from your benefits. That's a 50% penalty. 50%. So if I made an extra, let's say $10,000 for the year, I have $5,000 that's getting knocked off my Social Security. And a lot of people have no idea about this. We had this client, and she had unfortunately lost her husband. And so she was going back to work part-time just to get a little bit of extra income. Well, based off her original plan, the amount of hours she was going to work, she was going to go over this limit and have a pretty substantial penalty. But fortunately, we were able to catch that ahead of time. And what we did is asked her, well, how much are you going to get paid per hour? We reverse engineered her numbers and figured out what is the maximum amount of hours she can work without going over this. You want to know what the result was? She was going to work less and make more. How many of you would like to work less and make more, right? One of the benefits of running your numbers. Now, once you get to full retirement age, things change. You can make up to $56,520, and they reduce the benefit to a third. So now for every $3 you go over, $1 will be withheld from your benefits. And then after full retirement age, there's no limit to your earnings. So for those of you who raised your hand, make us a note on your notes page. If you're coming in for a discovery meeting, what we're going to do is we're going to run those numbers for you and let you know if you're going to have a penalty, and if so, what is it going to be? Because just if you have a penalty doesn't necessarily mean you need to change your earnings, right? If I'm going to make $56,000 a year, I'm going to have a $1,000 penalty. Am I not going to make that $56,000? Well, of course not. But I'd sure like to know, okay, here's this penalty, and how can I plan accordingly? And again, we can run that number for you. So when we're talking about ages, one of the questions we get is they said, Nick, well, what is the best time to pull? Should we pull early? Should we pull late? What are the pros and cons? So the earliest you can pull is age 62. The benefit here, obviously, is you're getting your benefits as early as possible, aside from widow benefits, which we'll talk about later. The downside is it's the smallest monthly check, and as we just discussed, you could have a reduction on your benefits. Now, at full retirement age, you get a higher monthly check. A lot of people consider this 100% of your benefits. So think of it this way. At full retirement age 67, every year that I pull early, it's about an 8% reduction. And every year that I delay, it's about an 8% increase, right? This is a general way to think of it. So at full retirement age, you're getting a higher check, but you didn't get benefits for those years prior. And again, we can have a reduction if you're making too much. Age 70 is the maximum. There's no benefit to waiting at age 70. They do not continue to increase those benefits. That's where it caps out. So this is going to be your highest benefit, no penalty if employed, and no benefits between age 62 and 70. So the natural question is, well, Nick, when is the best time to pull? What's going to be best? What does everybody else do? How does everybody else maximize it? So the best way to do this, if you guys want to jot this down, the best age to pull, considering all factors, there's unfortunately no one right answer. Every one of your situations is completely unique and different. We're only partway through here, and you've already seen that depending on if you have a pension, what type of pension, if you're working, how much you're making, if you're married or single, that's going to determine what that impacts. So the best way to do this is determining what path you're going to take. Here in Central Oregon, a lot of us are outdoor enthusiasts. We like to hike. And so the way we view this is you have this path in retirement, and you come up to a fork in the road. And so how to start determining when is going to be the best age is you want to figure out, are you first going to pull from your assets or Social Security? So let's say me and Riley, we both got our Social Security benefits. We got some IRAs and 401ks over here. So option A, we could start to pull our benefits early and let our assets sit and grow, right? Maybe our assets are doing well, we're a bit more aggressive, and we're not so concerned with this 8% increase. On the other side, we might say, you know what? Maybe we're a bit more conservative. We like the idea that this is getting 8%. We might want to draw from our assets first. So in order to start to determine that, we want to know if you have a tax problem. So if you guys have heard that analogy where they picture it's like a big glass jar, and they say, all right, when you're doing your scheduling, you take your big boulders first, you place those in, and then your next important priorities are your smaller rocks, and then your pebbles, sand, you backfill with water, and that's the order of operations, right? Well, it's the same thing we go through here. So if you can imagine, we're going to go through this filter, and we're going to start with what's most important, and by the time we get to the end, it's going to clearly highlight what is the best strategy, the what and the when for when you should pull. And that first part is we need to determine if you're going to have an RMD issue. How many of you know what required minimum distributions are? Okay, about 2 of you. That's typically what we see. And as long as I've been doing this, I would say this is probably the most surprising and least understood thing with retirement that applies to most everybody. So, aside from the 2 of you that raise your hands, or RMD is a required minimum distribution. If you have a pre-tax qualified account, so think your 401ks, your IRAs, your 457s, monies that have not been taxed yet, when you get to a certain age, based off the year you're born, for a lot of you it's going to be 73 or 75, whether you want to or not, whether you need to or not, the IRS is going to force you to start taking distributions on your money. I'm going to say that again. Even if you don't want to, even if you don't need to, you'll be forced to take distributions, and these distributions are fully taxable. So you can imagine where this might cause a problem. Let's say me and Riley have our Social Security and our pension, and we're perfectly fine. We're maintaining our standard of living and our retirement accounts, or maybe it's just inheritance, it's for long-term care, it's just for emergencies. We don't need to pull this money. But all of a sudden I get to 73, I'm forced to pull out a big chunk of money that's fully taxable. What do you think that's going to do to my taxes? What do you think that's going to do to the bracket I'm in? What do you think it's going to do to the taxes on my Social Security? So we want to start here because if this is our primary problem, it's going to change whether we want to pull early or whether we want to pull later. So let me give you an example of how we reverse engineer this. So let's say this is me and Riley. We got $60,000 a year in income. $40,000 is coming from Social Security and $20,000 in pension. But our expenses, what we want to live off of 70. So we got what we call an income gap. We need to pull an extra $10,000. Now fortunately, we got an IRA here off to the side, and let's pretend I'm 64. At a rate of return of 6%, by the time I get to 72 when those RMDs are going to be due, I'm going to have $807,000, assuming that I didn't touch that money. So I need to pull out $10,000. My RMDs are going to be $31,000. Anybody see the problem? There's an excess here of $21,000 that is fully taxable, and again, what do you think that's going to do to my taxes? So if that's the situation, we want to start to look and say, all right, well, how is Social Security going to be taxed, and what can I do about this? So in order to understand how Social Security is taxed, you want to understand something that's called provisional income. And provisional income is really simple. You're going to take the sum of your income and half your Social Security. So if we go back here, in me and Riley's situation, our actual income would be 60, but our provisional income would be 40, right? So half the Social Security at 20, a 20,000 pension, so our provisional income is 40. Now when I say all income, I mean all income. So your distributions, even those tax-free muni bonds, that counts towards this calculation, capital gains, pension payments, inheritances, this is a big one. Inheritances are tough because typically if we're going to receive an inheritance, we don't know necessarily the total amount, and we don't know when we're going to receive it. But if that's you, write us a note. We can go over this in the discovery meeting, because if you're thinking, hey, this is probably going to happen this year, or maybe you're in a situation where that family member's estate is being settled, it will probably be in your best interest to delay pulling those benefits until later. Otherwise, it could potentially cause a big tax issue. So again, just write us a note if that's you, and we can cover that for you. All right, so do a little calculation in your head. Picture what your provisional income is. Once you know that number, they're going to put you in brackets. So if we look at married filing jointly here, and me and Riley, we landed at $40,000. So what that means is up to 50% of our benefits are going to be taxable. You'll notice there's only 3 brackets with Social Security: 0, 50, and 85. And these are cliffs. So you go over by a single dollar, and you find yourself in that different bracket. Now, a lot of you are probably looking at this saying, well, why are these numbers so low? Because most people, especially in Oregon here, are going to find themselves over that 44,000 mark. Well, that's because these numbers have not been updated since 1985. Think about what things cost back then, right? Remember buying a house, what it was for a gallon of milk, a loaf of bread. Things were a lot cheaper. They have not updated these. So here's the good news about this. This is only federal tax. As Oregonians here, we do not pay Social Security on the state side. So what does that mean about our Social Security income? From a tax perspective, it's very valuable, because we have a 100% discount on the state side, and on the federal side, even if we land in this category, we still have a 15% discount. So aside from maybe pulling from cash, or if I have any tax-free Roth money, from a tax standpoint, this actually becomes more valuable than money maybe in my IRA, my 401k. So what you can see is that not all income is made equally. And I'm going to show you some examples here. Before we get to that, I want to pose a question to you. Let's say that we have a spouse. Let's just say it's me and Riley. We need $40,000 a year to maintain our standard of living, and one of us passes. I'll give you a second to think. What happens to them? All right, so ladies, keep in mind, 90% of the time you're going to be the surviving spouse here. The first thing that happens, regardless of who passes first, the lower check leaves the household. So if my Social Security check is $1,500 a month and Riley's is $3,000, whether she dies first or I die first, $1,500 leaves the household. So she's the surviving spouse. She just lost $1,500 a month. The second thing that happens is she's going to go from married filing jointly to a single filing status. So before, she was used to having 50% of her Social Security being taxable. Now she finds that 85% is taxable. So she lost me, she lost $1,500 a month, and that remaining income is now taxed at a higher rate. The next thing that happens is, well, she has to pull that money from somewhere. Well, fortunately, we have that IRA set aside, but if she was originally going to be pulling, let's say, $12,000 a month, now she's going to have to pull more. And if she's pulling in at an even higher tax rate, she has to pull more just to maintain her standard of living. What do you think that's going to do to the longevity of our money? Maybe before, we had a great planner. We planned everything out, we ran our numbers, we said, hey, the money's supposed to last till age 90. But I die at 78, and now she's drawing down much more than was expected. Is now the money going to last till 85, 83, 82? It'd be sure nice to know that, right? And this is one of the benefits of running your numbers. We can, again, go into the future, we can kill somebody off on paper and say, hey, what is this change going to happen? And for those of you who raise your hand with the pension, we can coordinate that benefit as well. Is there 100% survivorship on that benefit, or is it 50? So ladies, you'll be able to know, hey, here's the situation I'm going to be in when he passes. And if it looks good, you know what type of peace of mind that gives you to know that you're going to be okay? You don't have to worry about making the mortgage payments. You don't have to worry about maintaining your standard of living. That gives you so much peace of mind because you have clarity. But God forbid if the numbers don't look good, that's okay, because we're still here today in the room and we have time to make those adjustments. Maybe we're going to change the strategy for Social Security. Maybe if you haven't actually elected your pension yet, we can help advise on, hey, let's make sure we do a full survivorship rather than 75 or 50. So this is the benefit of running your numbers. So again, if this applies to you, make a note and we can go over that in your discovery meeting. Now, a lot of us, when it comes to taxes, I've got a little video here for you guys.
Oh my God! Where's all your money going? 6, 9, 10, 11. Let me fix my house. It's okay. It's part of the kitty. No, it's not fun. It's not fun to what? It's the worst part of weekend. It's what? Taxes.
Now, a lot of you might feel like little Johnny there, where taxes seem like unfair. I think it's funny that his brother continued to play the game in the background. He just didn't care. But what's accurate here is taxes, like a game, have defined rules. And typically, the person who knows the rules the best or knows how to use them to advantage is going to win the game. So we want to kind of even the odds here for you when it comes to tax strategies and how that impacts your income, your assets, and specifically your Social Security. So first of all, show of hands, how many people feel that taxes are high right now? Yeah, most people do. This is a chart here that actually goes back showing the top federal tax rates. And what you'll see is that aside from this small little dip here in the late 80s, early 90s, taxes right now today are the lowest they've been in 80 years. In fact, if you look at the average, it's above 60%. So when some of us are complaining about paying 30, 35, 40% on those taxes, we actually have it good compared to a lot of people in the past. And when we take into account factors like Social Security being underfunded, Medicare being underfunded, we have a national debt that's out of control. We just spent some sort of insane, ungodly amount of money due to the COVID pandemic. There's really very few options that are effectively going to help this country in the situation, aside from raising taxes. And if we go back historically, that's typically what's happened. So from our perspective, when we're looking at the data and the stuff that's coming across our desk, we feel that taxes are most likely going to be higher in the future. In fact, we actually know when that's going to take place. It's in 2026. So assuming that nothing changes, the Trump-era tax cuts that came into place in 2017 go away, and we will revert back to where things were in 2017. There's a couple of things that you'll notice here. So this is us today, 2023 rates. We got a 12%, we got a 22, we got a 24. These brackets are pretty nice and big. We also have a pretty large standard deduction. That all changes. Come 2026, when we go back to 2017, this is where we were before. And even though it was only about 10 years ago, a lot of people don't remember, but the 12 goes away, the 22 goes away, the 24 goes away. A lot of those brackets shrink. The standard deduction gets cut basically in half. So a lot of you actually used to itemize before 2017, and then the standard deduction was so good, it was such a huge benefit that you switched over. So why is this important? Well, we talked about having those RMDs and those taxes, right? And if we're trying to maximize our benefits, be as efficient as possible both with our income and our assets, well, if taxes are going to be higher in the future, wouldn't it make sense to pay taxes now while they're lower? In fact, Miss, what's your name?
April.
April, can we do a little bit of role play? You don't have to stand up, I'm not going to embarrass you. Okay. April, I'm going to be a bank, and you're coming to me for a mortgage. So what size mortgage would you like? 300,000, 500,000, $1 million? Pick a number.
500.
All right, so we have a $500,000 mortgage. And would you like a 15-year or a 30-year?
15.
All right, so we have a $500,000 mortgage. It's going to be a 15-year term. Now, April, I have a special going on. I'm not going to charge you any interest. So for the whole 15 years, everything you put towards that mortgage is going to go directly to principal. But in that last year, I get to decide what the interest is going to be. Maybe I charge you 4%, maybe I charge you 8%, maybe I charge you 20%. It'll be completely up to me. You'll have no say in the matter. Would you take that deal? Of course not, right? That would be a horrible option. I could charge her whatever I want, and you have no say and no control in the matter. Unfortunately, for all of you who have those pre-tax accounts, those 401ks, those IRAs, those 457s, that's the situation you're in. That was the deal you signed up for, which originally was a good deal when you started working. They said, hey, taxes are going to be lower in the future. So go ahead and put into that account. We can, defer taxes down the line. And not only that, for everything you put in this year, we're going to give you a discount. Sounded pretty great. But now you guys are looking to be one of the first generations that actually has higher taxes than you did in your working years. So we want to make plans and strategies for that so you actually get to keep more of what's yours. Because when it comes to taxes here, she's a fire-breathing dragon. There's ways that we can show you how to maximize your Social Security avoid some penalties, take some risk off the table with your portfolio. But typically when we're looking at strategies and we run the numbers for people, one of the biggest bangs for the buck we see is tax savings. You might be able to maximize your benefits, get a couple $1,000s here, but when you're implementing tax strategies and you potentially can be saving tens of thousands, that's typically the biggest bang for your buck. So rather than waiting until she's a fire-breathing dragon, let's approach her now when she's a little bit more easy to manage. Because basically what we want to do is we want to look to disinherit Uncle Sam. You can almost think of your taxes like like a mortgage debt. So if you sign up for a mortgage and they got you a fixed rate, and you can make your regular payments and run out the whole stream of the mortgage, and if you do so, who's going to benefit? The bank, right? You're going to pay the most amount of interest, and it's going to take you the longest time, and you're forced to make those payments. But instead, there's some options, right? We can take back some control. We can say, hey, we're going to start doubling down on those payments. We're going to start making some principal-only payments. We're going to do it so it benefits us in our timeline rather than benefiting you in your timeline. So when it comes to reducing taxes on our Social Security, there's a couple things we can do. One, you can consider postponing when you're going to pull those benefits. So for those of you who raised your hand saying, hey, we're thinking we're probably going to work maybe part-time while we're pulling our benefits, well, when we run the numbers for you, it might turn out more beneficial that instead of turning on those benefits and working, maybe you finish out the year, turn on those benefits at the beginning of the next year. Or maybe if you're deciding, hey, should I work an extra full year and turn on the benefits later or do it earlier? We've actually had a lot of situations where it's more beneficial that they retire earlier than expected. And again, one of the benefits of running your numbers, you can literally put two strategies side by side. Do I work an extra year? Do I retire at the end of the month? You can run those side by side and see the black and white numbers, what is going to be best for your situation. Which do you get the most amount of income? Which do you pay the least amount of taxes? Do you avoid any penalties? What is that going to look like? And that helps give you clarity and peace of mind. Some of the other things that looking at is changing how you do distributions. So if you guys remember on the tax bracket slide, depending on where you're at in your bracket is really important, especially on the Social Security side. We've seen situations where people actually reduce their distributions by a little bit and they actually save more in taxes. So now you're able to maintain your standard of living, you're drawing less from your assets, which is going to help improve its longevity, and you get to pay less in taxes. Again, it's a benefit of running your numbers and having that clarity. Now you see here at the bottom, one of the things we found is a very effective strategy is what we call a Roth conversion. So Roth conversion is basically saying, hey, I know I got to pay my taxes, but I'm going to do it on my schedule when it benefits me in the amount and the time I want, rather than waiting for the government to tell me what I have to do and how much I have to take out. So I want to give you an example here of 3 households. So every household is going to have $100,000 of income. So just on street level, everybody looks like they're making the same amount. But it's not how much they make, it's how much they get to keep that matters. So the first household here, $100,000 of income. We got $70,000 coming from an IRA. So what do we know about that? We know it's fully taxable, state and federal. $30,000 from Social Security. We know that there's no state tax and only a portion is going to be taxed on the federal side. But let's say they're at the highest rate, so 85%. So fully taxable state and federal, no state tax, and a 15% discount on the federal side. Their taxes here in the state of Oregon, assuming a standard deduction, married, filing jointly, $12,816, or what we refer to as a 12% effective rate. Now, household B looked at this and they said, you know, I really don't like that we're paying all these taxes on that $70,000, so we're just going to invert the numbers. Same $100,000 of income, but they have $30,000 that's fully taxable, and now the bulk of that money, the $70,000, gets the discount. Their taxes just reduced by 66%, despite having the same amount of income. So it's not how much you make, it's how much you get to keep, and not all dollars are taxed equally. So if you're thinking about your situation, like, well, we got Social Security, we got a pension, maybe you got some IRA distributions, maybe you already have some Roth money, and you have this goal of saying, hey, we want to live off $8,000 a month. Well, what is the best order to use that money, right? Which accounts do you drain first? Do you go one at a time? Do you split it? This is one of the benefits of having an income plan because it shows you what is the optimum strategy for that. Now, we're not done yet. We still have household C. Household C, they looked at household B and they said, okay, I like how you improved over A here, but I still just don't like that we're paying so much on the tax side here. So what they did is they did a conversion. They took a portion of that money, half of it, and they converted that over to a Roth. And so with the Roth money, once it's been in there for 5 years, it's completely tax-free. Completely tax-free income, like pulling cash out of your savings. Their taxes on $100,000 is less than 1%. So we went from paying $12,000 in taxes to paying less than $1,000 just in the way we ordered our income. Now you can imagine if this was your funds and you're paying $12,000 in taxes versus you're paying $1,000, what could you do with that extra $11,000? Well, if you left it in your account, I imagine your account's gonna last a lot longer. Or maybe you wanna pocket that money. $11,000 is a pretty nice trip. You can go to Hawaii off that money. So the question becomes, do we wanna pay taxes on the seed or do we wanna pay taxes on the harvest? So if this is something that applies to you and we highlight in your meeting that you have an RMD issue, one of the things we're gonna look at is, would a Roth conversion be appropriate? And if so, we're gonna run a report that looks just like this. So in this example, we got $500,000 in an IRA. We're gonna assume that their taxes are 25% and they've been making about 5% per year. So on the left side here, if they keep the money qualified. Now qualified is just fancy IRS language. Just think your pre-tax money. Think your IRAs, your 401ks. There's gonna be 3 taxes over the life of those funds. The first is the taxes on the RMDs, $161,000. Oh, I should clarify. This report here is only a 17-year window. We're going from age 73 when the RMDs would start to a hypothetical end of life of age 90. So this is just what the taxes will be over 17 years. So those RMDs are forced to come out. The money comes out, it's fully taxable. You pay $161,000 in taxes. Well, like most people, it's excess income. You're not just gonna put it under your mattress. So assuming that you reinvest that at the same 5%, you're then gonna pay taxes again on the reinvested interest. This is in the form of your capital gains. So on that dollar, you've been taxed once. Now you're gonna be taxed twice, and if that wasn't bad enough, they're gonna tax you a third time, and that goes to your beneficiaries or your heirs. So these first 2 are the taxes you're gonna pay. This third one is whoever's going where that money's going. So this is going to your kids or your grandkids. Uncle Sam's not only taking a chunk out of yours, but he's also taking a chunk out of their inheritance. So we wanna say, well, what can we do to start to disinherit Uncle Sam and make this more favorable for us? So with the Roth conversion, basically we're saying, hey, we're going to take out a certain amount, we're gonna pay the taxes, we're gonna put it in a Roth account. Once it sits there for 5 years, it's fully tax-free. So if we have $500,000, maybe we were gonna convert that over a 5-year period, or a 10-year period, right? We're doing $50,000 a year, nice small chunks. Taxes paid on the conversion would be $125,000. Once it's in the Roth, there's no taxes on growth. So no taxes on interest, no capital gains, no required minimum distributions, and that money goes to our heirs, to our kids, to our grandkids without Uncle Sam taking his chunk. So just in this example here, we can see this is a pretty substantial tax savings. So again, if this applies to you, one of the first things we want to do is to highlight, all right, well, how much should be converted? And if so, how are we going to make that conversion? How does it partner with our plan? And typically, not in every situation, but typically, if we're doing a Roth conversion, it's typically beneficial to actually delay pulling our Social Security. Because when we're doing our conversions, we want our income lower so we can be converting higher amounts. And if we delay our Social Security, well, what do we know? We get an 8% bump approximately every year. So in doing this, we've actually done 2 things. We've increased our income and we've reduced our taxes all in one move. So again, if this applies to you, write me a little note. This is one of the things that we can cover in our meeting together. Now we actually can take it a step further and we can do a report that goes a bit more detailed and we can see what the benefits are to us, to our heirs, and then there's the increase to the estate. So doing this conversion strategy, if it's applicable to you, is not just about saving in taxes. So think of it this way. If I have 2 accounts, I have my Roth and my IRA, fully taxable, fully tax-free. Let's say they're both making 5%. Well, this is going to grow 5% without any taxes attached to it, where this, anything I take out, is going to have taxes. So there's an increase, which you can see here. This increase to the estate, basically what that means, additional money that I get to spend while I'm alive, and additional money I get to pass on. So whether if that's going to my kids, my grandkids, maybe it's going to a church or a charity, It means that I'm blessed while I'm alive, where I get to spend more disinherited Uncle Sam, and same with those who are going to receive those funds afterwards. I had a couple questions at the break in regards to the strategy session, so I just want to clarify a couple things. What the strategy session is basically a time to have you come in, have your numbers ran, update your Social Security report. What this is going to do for you is it's going to give you peace of mind of knowing that you've mathematically tested your income sources, you've crossed your T's, you've dotted your I's. And what this does is it lets you know confidently that the strategy you're going to implement has been checked. It's been checked by professionals that have done this over and over and over and over and over, thousands of times. We know the questions to ask. We know the things to double check. So whether your situation is simple or it's complicated, you got multiple income sources, multiple accounts, we're gonna be able to cross-check and say, all right, what is that optimum strategy for you? How do we keep those taxes low? How do we avoid fees? How do we avoid penalties? And the big thing is, how do you put together an income plan? A written income plan that shows you, hey, here's what we're going to start with. Here's how the income is going to transition. When are we turning on certain benefits? When are we turning off certain benefits? And we actually started, our office started as educators. We were with AFIA, which is the American Financial Education Alliance. And so I was an instructor, president of the Central Oregon chapter. And it was just a great way to give back to the community. We enjoyed teaching. And what we found, it was actually a great way to meet clients. And so this is part of what we do as our marketing. It is a way to give back. But for those of you who come in, some of you are just going to come in. It's going to be the one meeting. We're going to be able to run that Social Security report, answer your questions, make sure you get everything you need, and that might be the end of the process. But for some of you, if it's more complicated, we're actually going to want to have our team dive into your statements. You might have a series of reports, some of them that we've shown here today that need to be run. And we're actually going to invite you back for a second visit. And during that visit, we're actually going to walk you through everything in detail. We're going to give that to you, all of our findings, all the reports, in a bound folder, and we're going to do that completely free of charge. And we set it up that way on purpose. I don't know how many financial offices some of you have been to, but we found, with due respect, a lot of them kind of treat themselves like attorneys. You come in, you tell them what your needs are, and they say, yeah, we can help with that. And you said, great. And they said, well, you're going to have to pay us first. And we just feel that's kind of backwards. So for those of you who are going to go through that process, we're going to do all that work on the front end. We're going to be completely transparent. We're going to show you exactly what it'd look like to potentially work with us. And we're going to give that to you for consideration. And once you have a chance to look at that, if you'd like to have a conversation about what it would look like to engage our office for services, we can do so. But if not, no strings attached, no bait and switch, you don't owe us anything, we part as friends. The other question I got, some people asked, wanted to know, well, how do we get paid? Because obviously we were doing this for profit. This event is free, you don't owe us anything, but we are a for-profit business. So we get paid in one of two ways and one of two ways only. The first is standard advisory fees. For those of you who may have been working with an investment advisor, you're used to paying those fees, they come out of your accounts, so we charge that on the assets that we are managing. As fiduciaries, we eliminated a conflict of interest a long time ago that we never double dip. So there's some accounts that we receive commissions, but it's never going to be both. And by setting up this model, it provides some benefits to our clients. The first of which is if we're receiving an advisory fee, we're never going to receive a commission, we're never going to make anything on a trade or transaction. So if I come to you and I say, hey, I think we need to buy this and sell this, you know that it's simply because it's in your best interest and not because we're lining our pockets. So it eliminates that conflict of interest right there, helps us honor our fiduciary standard. On the second side, there are some accounts that pay a commission. Now, I didn't set it up that way. That's just how they're paid out. We are not going to double dip and charge an advisory fee. So when it's a commission-based account, product, or service, we only work with carriers where that is paid by the carrier. So we're getting compensated. Our clients don't have to foot the bill. And because we're not double dipping, anything we use in that account, it basically eliminated their fees altogether. So hypothetically, let's just say for a simple example, we had 50% under an advisory fee model, 50% under commission. I've not only eliminated conflict of interest, but I've basically cut that client's fees in half. So typically our clients see anywhere between a 30 to a 50% reduction in their fees. And our fees are very clear. One of the reports we'll be providing for you is a fee summary. And so what this does is it's going to show you exactly what you're currently paying. A lot of people don't know what they're paying in advisory fees, management fees, their expense ratios. We're going to show you exactly what that looks like. And for your consideration, we're going to do a side-by-side, apples-to-apples comparison of what our fee is going to be. So if we end up having a conversation about what it looks like to work together, you're going to know exactly what you're paying and what it could be with us. Does that all make sense? Any other questions about that? Okay, perfect. All right, so we're going to jump into our final section here. We're going to be doing some report examples. I'm going to show you how to start turning on those benefits. All right, so this is a sample of the Social Security report that we actually run. A lot of people are not aware that your Social Security statement, so if you happen to have one with you, if you take a look, it is not accurate. Your statements are based in today's dollars. So let's say you're 60 in the room today and you're looking at your benefit at age 70. It does not account for the cost of living adjustments that we typically get every year. So your statements are actually showing a lower benefit than you'll most likely have. So the first thing we want to do is we want to update your statement to show you exactly what that number is going to be at any future date. And next, when we run through your strategies, we're going to break it down and show you exactly when to turn on that benefit. And what you can see here in Kim's example is she had no idea she was eligible for a spousal benefit. She got an additional $481 per month. She had no idea about. She's going to get that every month for the rest of her life with that COLA adjustment. Now, typically, I would change the names of the people for their privacy, but Warren and Kim are my parents, so they gave me permission to keep that there. In fact, their situation was actually one of the great joys of my career. For those of you familiar with Intel, that's kind of headquartered up in Hillsboro, you know Intel where they wore the bunny suits commercial, like doo 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 doo. So my dad worked in the fab, and he did that for many, many years. But he got his start, he was working during the day and actually going to school at night to get his bachelor's degree. So my mom, myself, and my two younger sisters, I think it would have been 3 at the time, my younger sisters, he was basically missing us grow up. He would work all day, he'd come home, he'd have about an hour, he'd eat, change, and then it was off to night school. So there was a quick tuck-in, and that's all I saw my dad. And it was like that for multiple years. So he got towards the end of his bachelor's degree, and he made the tough decision that he was missing his family grow up. He was missing being there for his kids, he was missing being there for his wife, and so he actually stopped and didn't finish his degree, and just basically worked his way up at Intel, worked his way up the hard way. Despite not having a degree, he basically became one of the most well-respected equipment engineers in the fab. He was rubbing shoulders with the engineers despite not having the degree, and knew his job inside out and backwards. And we lived in Gresham. So Gresham to Hillsboro without any traffic is about a 45-hour drive there. And what he would say is on the way back, if he left 10 to 15 minutes later, it typically cost him an extra hour just because everyone's converging there on the 24. And he did that for 30 years, 5 days a week, just driving back and forth. So he's in his late 50s. His boss comes to him one day and he says, Warren, we're going to let you go. You have 2 choices. You can either voluntarily retire now, we'll give you a 6-month severance, or we're going to have to just let you go in 6 months. So my dad took the option, completely surprised, and he went with the severance, and in his late 50s, without a degree, found himself back out on the workforce. Now my mom, she grew up very poor. She was the type that was working multiple jobs from the time when she was in her early teens, and so she had a lot of issues with money. She was always wanting to save because she was so concerned about running out. And so when this happened, you can imagine that brought up a lot of fears and concerns for her. So what I was able to get to do, my dad had a 401k. We were able to roll that over, get them structured in a way, mapped out their income plan. And my parents now are fully retired. They retired 2.5 years earlier than they planned. They have 0 debt, and they pay no taxes in retirement. And they have an extra $1,000 a month they get to do whatever the heck they want with. And that was the first part. It was putting that plan in place and giving them that clarity. My dad, it worked out great. He was happy, he got to retire. My mom, it took a little extra work because despite seeing the numbers, she still had that fear of running out. So she was the type that would go to a restaurant, and even though she wanted to order the burger, she would order the salad, right? Because she was so afraid about money. And one of the things that we found is the benefit of having a written income plan is it gives you permission. There's this example of the study they did with these school kids. And there was this playground, and there was no fence. And so they put the kids in the middle, and what they found is that the kids would actually stay close to the playground. But then they put a fence, it was like 50 yards out on either side, and the kids immediately expanded out to their boundaries because they knew where they could play. It's the same thing with an income plan. We can run it in a way that says, hey, Here's making sure your standard of living is maintained. And here's what that upper spending limit is going to look like, where you still make sure you won't outlive your money. And it took a couple meetings, but my mom finally got that. And what that did is it gave her permission to spend. Because when you're in retirement, you have a lot of things that are on your bucket list. You want to travel. You want to go golfing. You want to go hiking. You want to spend time with your kids, your grandkids, all the different things you've been thinking of. But if you have that thing on your shoulder, that back in your mind, like, what if we run out of money? What if we spent too much? You don't actually get to enjoy the trips. One of the things we love doing for our clients is they'll come in, they'll say, Nick, hey, we're looking at taking this cruise. We want to pull out $10,000 this summer. Can we do it? What does that look like? And so we'll run the reports. We'll say, first of all, what is that going to do to the longevity? Where are we going to pull that from? Which account? Which assets are we selling off? Is there an impact to the taxes? And so what they get to do is they get to see the impact of a financial decision before they actually make it. And we can do that with pretty much anything. We've done it with buying and selling houses. Should they finance the car? Should they buy it outright? And that is one of the benefits we get, and one of the things we love is it's that engagement with our clients. And it helps give them that peace of mind. It gives them that clarity, and again, it gives them that permission, so when they go on that trip, they get to fully enjoy it. They're not coming back wondering like, should we put too much on the credit card, or is this gonna impact this? Are we gonna have a surprise next April on the taxes? We ran the numbers ahead of time. They get to confidently move forward with their decision. And it's one of the things that we love what we do. My team and I are super passionate about what we do. We basically get paid to serve, and we get to run numbers all day. We're pretty much numbers geeks, and we just enjoy that a lot. One of the important things about maximizing your benefits is all of you are living a lot longer. In the United States, those who are living to 100 and beyond are one of the fastest growing demographics in our country. And when we look at those that make it to that point, we find it's about an 80-20 split. 80% are women, 20% are men. So ladies, remember I said 90% of the time you're the surviving spouse. So if you make it to age 100, you're single, just keep in mind that the percentage of eligible bachelors, it's pretty slim there. Now statistically, you're not gonna just outlive us by 1 to 2 years. On average, it's about 5 to 10. So when we're putting together that income plan for you, you wanna make sure it's gonna make sure that you have the income you need for a long period of time, 5, 10, 15 years. So you're gonna have that peace of mind. Because when it comes to longevity, it continues to grow each and every year. In fact, does anybody know when Social Security started? What year? 1935. Yes, sir. And in 1935, the average life expectancy was 64. Social Security started at 65. So it was never meant for everyone. It was only meant for the few of us who actually live longer than expected. What if we put it in today's terms, it'd be like Social Security starting in our late 80s, right? So for a male, it's 83, female is 86. This one's the one that always gets me. The chance that me or Riley live to 97, it's a 1 in 4 shot. So if I'm 67 in the room here today, the decisions I'm making about my Social Security, I gotta make sure it's good for at least a 30-year period. And if you think about if there's any hunters in the room, like when you're bow hunting, right? If I'm trying to hit this target over here and I launch an arrow, if I'm off by a little bit, by the time it hits that wall, maybe I'm off by a couple inches. But if I'm trying to hit a target across town, if I'm off by a couple inches here, by the time I get all the way across town, I'm off by a lot. And why I share that is when we're income planning, we found that it's those slight tweaks that make a difference. So for example, we've seen people when they've come in, they had an existing advisor who's an investment advisor, maybe not a planner, and he's running an income report for them. And maybe he's basing that off of an 8% rate of return. That's way too high. I would much rather see a plan that's based off a real conservative rate, maybe 3, 4, maybe 5%. We want to assume that inflation is going to be higher than expected. We want to assume that you're going to spend more than expected. We want to assume that your portfolio is going to return less. We want to assume that taxes are higher. Because if I assume all those things in a worst case scenario, and I forecast that out to age 95 or 100, and you're still positive with income, then we know we have a good, solid, stable plan that's not based off you just getting a high rate of return. Because the chances of all those things happening are fairly unlikely. But we probably will have some years of high inflation. We know what that feels like. We'll probably have a couple years of high taxes. There's some years we might spend more. And there's years where your portfolio might not perform as well as you expected. So we kind of want to plan for the worst, but hope for the best. And that's going to give you confidence of knowing you have a well, solid, defined income plan. All right. In the past, normally we haven't touched on this, but with the volatility that we've seen in the market, there's an important factor in regards to how you are pulling your income. So picture step one is, okay, I got this defined income plan. I know what I need to pull. The next question is, well, how do you pull it? Where do you pull it from? So I want to give you an example. And there's no trick questions on this. But if I was just showing you a portfolio and one was returning 9% and one was returning 6%, which one do you want? 9, right? It's higher. Now, if we look at the best year of portfolio at the 9, it's done 33. The other one's done 21. I still want the one that's done better. Once we pull in the downside, now maybe we start to switch. Maybe some of us who are a little more conservative don't want to stomach the 37 and more comfortable with 13. Now, if we had started with $1 million and we worked this down through time, after 20 years, we got 4 million on one, 35 on the other. So if I can stomach that volatility, the option on the left is still in my best interest. And this is typically where the calculations stop. So for those of you who have been working with an investment advisor, maybe you've been with them for 10, 15, 20 years, their job, and hopefully they've done it well, is to earn you as much money as possible based on the amount of risk that you're comfortable with. So you most likely went in, answered some risk questions, they put you in conservative, aggressive, what have you, and their job is to say, all right, let's make sure we can get as much as possible for this client. When you get to retirement, though, the numbers change. The math changes, and you can't simply go off this because what ends up happening is we're going to throw in another variable, which is income. And if any of you remember back to, I don't know if it's grade school, high school math, but it's the order of operations, and when you add in another variable, the result completely changes. So let's say that we were going to start with $40,000. There was a general study that was done back in '93. Most of you are familiar with the 4% rule. We're just going to use that as a general gauge. So 4% of $1 million, $40,000. We also want to make sure we're adjusting for inflation. So if I'm adding about 3%, the first year I'm pulling 40, the next year I'm pulling 41.2, and it's going to continue down the line. After 20 years, I'll be pulling out $78,000 a year just to maintain that original $40,000. And what this highlights is that on average, just with average inflation, your expenses double about every 20 years. So think about what your expenses are now. If you're like, hey, I want to live off $6,000 a month, your income plan needs to account for a drawdown of around 12 in the future. So at the end of that time point, we've pulled out basically $1.3 million. Most people would look at this and say, all right, well, if I started with 4 and I pulled out 1.3, I still have a chunk left. But this is how the math actually works out. On the one side, you have $250,000 left. And that next year, that $78,000 is going to be over 80 grand. How many more years do I have in retirement before my money runs out? I only got a few. But on this other side of the table, I actually have basically what I started with. How in the world is that possible? It has to do with two factors. One, it's how we do our drawdowns, and two, it's what's called sequence of returns risk. And by structuring portfolios in a way where we can make sure we don't have to draw down and down markets, this can literally add longevity to your portfolio. So one of the reports we can run is an investment report. And on this, one of the things we look at is, let's say this was your portfolio here, these were your funds, right? So we can see here, this is the market value. There's two things I want to look at. I want to look at the 5-year annualized return, and also want to look at the expense ratio. So if we're going to start drawing down some money this year, maybe you guys are going to take a trip, you're going to pull out $10,000. Well, where do I want to pull it from? If I start looking down here, I'm probably looking at this guy. Over the last 5 years, this guy has lost me money every year, and that doesn't even count inflation. And if addition, that this guy is actually one of my high-cost funds, well, it makes it a really easy target. I want to sell off my losers. I want to keep my winners. I want to sell off my high-cost funds. I want to keep my low-cost funds. And what this can do is literally add longevity into your portfolio. So as planners, when our clients come to us and they're needing to take a distribution, or we're setting up that income plan, we're not just determining which account should they pull from. Based off our strategy, are we pulling from the IRAs now, or have we had transitions and we need to pull from the Roths for tax purposes? But once we highlight which account, we go in and say, all right, which fund are we specifically selling off? It's very, very important, because how many of you have made a request to pull funds from your account and they just asked you how much? Typically what ends up happening is they'll submit that request to the trade desk, and they'll just equal or pull the accounts equally from all positions. That might not be the best strategy for you. So by being detailed as planners, because we're so focused on income, because frankly in your retirement, income drives everything. Income is the foundation of your plan. Once you have your income plan in place, that should actually dictate how your portfolio is structured. Because up to this point, your portfolio has been structured simply by, well, how much risk are you comfortable with? And then again, the advisor's job is to make you as much as possible. But now that we're throwing income in, it becomes a different calculation. We want to make sure that, hey, if we need to be pulling $4,000 a month adjusted for inflation for the next 30 years, is the portfolio structured in a way that it can actually throw off that income and we don't run out of money? So in other words, we want the income plan and the portfolio to complement each other. And a lot of times what we see is they're fighting against each other. So we can run those reports and see, are these things dialed in? Is everything working holistically? And once you have those two in place, it becomes very simple to overlay a tax strategy and see, okay, how can we now drop taxes on our income? Is there any opportunities to reduce taxes on our investments? So you got your income plan, which is the foundation. It's telling you how to structure the portfolio, and then we look for efficiencies on our taxes. Wrong clicker. To round this out, when we're talking about holistic planning, one of the things you want to consider is healthcare costs. I'm sure a lot of you, it's no surprise that healthcare costs are rising and rising. Not just with basic healthcare, but show of hands, how many of you know someone or have actually put someone in a facility? Maybe it's a grandparent, parent, long-term care facility, memory facility. Those things are only getting more expensive. And if that's not accounted for, it can actually have a big impact. Maybe you're someone who's looking to retire before 65 when you're eligible for Medicare. Well, you're going to have to look at some private insurance. Have you accounted for what that cost is going to be? Is there health issues that run in your family? Should you be looking at a long-term care plan? And if so, are you looking at a traditional policy or are you looking at some alternative? I know personally the impact of what healthcare costs can do. My wife and I brought 2 twin girls into the world last January. They were born 6 weeks early, and we spent 28 days in the NICU. It was the longest month of my life. And it was very, very expensive. But fortunately, we had planned for this. We knew the risk of, we ended up going through an IVF process. We knew the stats and the risks if they came early, what that could look like. So we planned accordingly before we ever went down this road. So God forbid if this were to happen, we weren't going to drain our savings. It wasn't going to blow up our retirement plan. And now my girls are, they're going to be 11 months here on Thursday. They are healthy, they are happy. And again, we didn't mess up their future or ours by having some huge medical bill that we were going to pay for years. So just like we were accounting for an income plan, there's a way to run reports and say, all right, where's the risk on the health insurance side? Where's the risk on long-term care? Do we need to put a policy in place? Maybe it's something as simple as a life insurance policy to make sure debt's taken care of when a spouse passes. Whatever that looks like, you can run a simple analysis, see what your needs are, and then we can run rates for you if that's appropriate. All right, as we get close to wrapping up here. So determining your strategy is first, what is your income goal? This becomes your target. The way you want to think of this number, it's easy to think in monthly terms, and it's easy to think in after-tax dollars. So what is the amount that you want to hit your pocket every month? Because like I've mentioned a bunch of times, I probably sound like a broken record at this point, it's not how much you make, it's how much you keep that matters. So maybe for you, that number is $6,000 a month. We want $6,000 every month, regardless of where it's coming from, after taxes, penalties, and fees, to hit our bank account. The next thing you need to ask is, all right, well, what are your income sources? As we've discussed, different sources have different pros and cons. They're taxed differently, some have fees, some don't, some have offsets, some don't. So what are our sources? What are basically the pieces of the puzzle that we get to work with? And 3 is how and in what order, I can't stress that enough, it's what order we're going to put those in. Again, you can think of a math equation where you maybe have the same 3 variables, but depending on if you are subtracting, then dividing, then minus, the order you put those in, you're going to get a different outcome. So you have a certain amount of assets, you have some income. How do we put those together strategically to optimize them, to make them as efficient as possible? So for those of you who are going to be coming in for the discovery meeting, you have 2 sheets in front of you. You got your notes page, hopefully full with a bunch of stuff that we're going to be talking about. And then you also have your Discover Meeting form. If you could go ahead and mark that out, it's just basic information. We're not going to send that out. We just use that to communicate with you. Go ahead and choose 2 options there. Lexa, if you could raise your hand. Lexa is going to be taking those forms. You can drop those off to her. Our team will be getting back to you within 24 hours. You're going to be getting a confirmation email to let you know when you're coming in and also what to bring. So when you come in, it's really simple. We just need 2 things. 1, we need your Social Security statements. We need them recent. And then also, we need your full account statements. Why do they need to be full and not a summary page? Because we're actually going to enter every single position you have, every ticker, every holding, everything, so we can do a complete analysis. So if you're looking at your statement and it says page 1 of 8, make sure you bring all 8 pages. That's all you need to bring. We'll take care of everything else. Our office is out in Sisters, Oregon. Again, you'll be meeting with myself or one of our advisors. We also have virtual options, so if you'd like to make that Zoom or phone call for that initial meeting, we can do so. I hope you guys got a bunch out of this. As we mentioned in the beginning, the goal is that you got some information that you'd be able to take away to improve your situation, and hopefully you feel this is worth it. You guys have been a great audience. Please give yourselves a round of applause. Thank you.